The night of my graduation was supposed to be simple: a reservation, a handshake, a few polite smiles to close one chapter and step into the next. That was the plan. Halfway through dinner, my father leaned across the table and spoke like he was asking for the salt. "You're going to transfer your inheritance to your sister tonight." I let out a short breath, almost a laugh. Thought it was a bad joke. He didn't smile. "You didn't earn your grandfather's money," he added. The table went quiet. Glasses paused mid-air. My mother looked down at her plate. My sister didn't say anything, but she didn't look surprised either. "I'm not signing anything," I said. No explanation, no argument, just that. My father studied me for a second, like I'd spoken out of turn. Then he reached into his bag and pulled something out, my diploma. He held it up so everyone could see. A clean, framed symbol of 4 years of work. Then he flipped open a lighter. The flame caught fast. Paper curls quickly when it burns, faster than you expect. The edges darkened, twisted inward. Someone at the table gasped. A waiter froze mid-step. The smell hit a second later. I watched it happen, didn't move, didn't say a word. This wasn't about the diploma, it never was. He thought he was taking something from me, thought this would force a reaction, an apology, compliance. He was wrong. When the flame died, I set my napkin down, stood up, and looked at him. "Are you done?" My voice stayed even. Then I walked out. No scene, no hesitation, because the reason I stayed calm that night wasn't something he could burn. And a week later, sitting across from a lawyer, they were about to understand exactly why. My name is Ethan Carter, and for most of my life, I learned how to be present without being noticed. No one ever said it outright. No one pulled me aside and told me to stay quiet or take up less space. It was something I figured out early, the kind of lesson you don't hear, you absorb. In my family, everything had a structure. My father spoke, and things moved. Decisions, plans, expectations, he set them, and everyone else adjusted. My mother made it look smoother than it was. She softened his tone, filled in the gaps, made control feel like care. And then there was my younger sister, Lily. She was the kind of person people noticed right away. Expressive, emotional, the center of every room without trying. Relatives gravitated toward her at family gatherings, drawn to her energy, her reactions, her presence. I was the opposite. When people asked about me, it always sounded like an afterthought. And Ethan, my mother would smile politely. "He's easy, very responsible." Responsible, that word followed me everywhere. It sounded like approval, but it wasn't. It meant I didn't need attention, didn't need support, didn't need checking in on. It meant I could handle things on my own, so they didn't have to. I understood what it really meant early. It meant if something had to be sacrificed, it would be mine. If someone needed more, it wouldn't be me. And over time, I adjusted. I stopped expecting questions, stopped offering explanations. Learned to solve problems before they became visible. Learned to stay quiet when something didn't feel right. Not because I didn't notice, because noticing never changed anything. So I became what they called me: easy, reliable, the one who didn't make things complicated. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't simple. I was just paying attention. I don't remember the exact moment I understood the pattern. There wasn't a single event that explained everything. It built over time. Small moments stacking on top of each other, until ignoring it took more effort than accepting it. When I was 11, I built a mechanical project for a school exhibition. Not a kit, something I designed from scratch. Late nights at my desk, wires spread out, parts taken apart and rebuilt until it worked the way I wanted. The morning of the event, I stood by the front door, holding it carefully in both hands. My father grabbed his keys. "We're running late." For what I asked. "Lily has her art workshop across town." That was it. No discussion, no adjustment, just a decision already made. I walked to school alone that day, the weight of the project pulling against my arms. In the gym, other kids stood next to their displays with their parents. Pictures, encouragement, small conversations that filled the space. I set mine up, stepped back, and waited. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I didn't need them there. But something settled in my chest anyway. Quiet, familiar. At 15, I got accepted into a competitive academic program out of state. The kind of opportunity teachers called rare, the kind people usually celebrated. At the bus terminal, my mother reminded me to eat properly. My father told me not to cause problems. Neither of them asked if I was nervous. Neither of them asked if I was proud. I nodded, picked up my bag, and got on the bus. That night, somewhere between cities. I stopped expecting those questions. After that, things got easier. I handled paperwork myself, deadlines, logistics, Problems that didn't need to reach anyone else. Teachers trusted me. Supervisors relied on me. I became efficient at staying ahead of things. Low maintenance, that was the word they would have used. What it really meant was simple. If something required attention, it wouldn't be me. If something went wrong, I would fix it before it mattered. And if something felt unfair, I wouldn't say it out loud, not because I didn't see it, because I had already learned how it would end, so I adapted. Not to be accepted, but to stop expecting anything I wasn't going to get. The only person who ever broke that pattern was my grandfather. His name was Arthur Hayes. To everyone else, he was just an old man who had done well for himself and preferred to stay out of family conversations. Quiet, reserved, easy to overlook if you weren't paying attention. I paid attention. He never interrupted people to praise me, never made a show of it. But when I spoke, he listened. Not the kind of listening people pretend to do while waiting for their turn to talk. Actual listening. If I explained how something worked, he let me finish. If I asked a question, he didn't simplify the answer just to move on. One afternoon, when I was 16, I asked him why he always paused before responding. He set his coffee down and looked at me for a second. People who rush to speak usually want control, he said. People who wait already have it. That stuck. I started spending more time with him after that. Not because he asked me to, because I didn't have to compete for space around him. We didn't talk constantly. Sometimes we'd sit in his kitchen while the coffee went cold. Other times we walked through his backyard while he talked about the company he built from nothing. He didn't tell stories like someone trying to impress you. He talked like someone showing you how things actually worked. Control isn't about volume, he said once, trimming a hedge with slow, careful movements. It's about timing and knowing when not to react. As I got older, the conversation shifted. He started asking what I was studying, what I paid attention to, what kind of work made sense to me long term. I told him I liked systems, structure, solving problems before they escalated. He nodded like that confirmed something he already suspected. One day, during my junior year, he handed me a thick folder. Read this. Inside were contracts, old agreements, amendments marked in pen, notes in the margins that weren't obvious unless you looked twice. I flipped through them, confused. You don't need to understand everything yet, he said, but you need to learn how people protect what matters to them. That was the first time anyone in my family treated me like I wasn't just reliable, but capable, not convenient, trusted. And I understood something then that no one else seemed to notice. He wasn't just teaching me, he was preparing me. As my grandfather's health started to decline, the conversations changed. He didn't talk less, he just spoke more directly. There was no build-up the night he said it, no attempt to soften the message. We were sitting in his study, late evening, the room dim, except for a single lamp casting light across the desk between us. Papers were stacked neatly like they always were, nothing out of place. He looked at me for a long second before speaking. When I'm gone, they're going to come to you. I didn't ask who. I already knew. Your father, your mother, your sister, he said. They won't wait long. I stayed quiet. They'll call it family, he continued. They'll call it fairness. They'll tell you it's the right thing to do. He paused, letting that settle. But it won't be about any of that. I leaned back slightly in my chair. What will it be about control? The word landed clean. No emotion attached, just fact. He reached forward, resting his hand flat on the desk. Whatever they ask you, don't answer right away, he said. Don't explain. Don't justify. I nodded once. Let the process handle it, he added. The process, I asked. A faint smile crossed his face. Not warm. Certain. The law, he said. It's slower than people, and a lot harder to manipulate. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. I understood exactly what he was telling me. This wasn't a conversation about possibility. It was instruction. A few weeks later, he passed quietly in his sleep. No chaos, no final scene, just absence. At the funeral, my father stood at the front, speaking about legacy and respect. My mother cried openly. My sister leaned into her, talking about how much she would miss him. I stood a few steps back, listening, watching, noticing what wasn't being said. No one mentioned the conversations we had. No one mentioned the time he spent preparing me. To them, I was still the same, reliable, quiet, easy to overlook. After the service, things shifted, subtle at first. My father started asking questions, casual tone, controlled delivery. Did he ever mention the house? What about the business? Any plans he talked about, I gave the same answer every time. No, what I didn't say was that I didn't need him to explain it. I already knew what was coming. They weren't asking out of curiosity, they were positioning, and I remembered exactly what he told me. Don't rush, let the process handle it. So I waited. After the funeral, nothing changed all at once. It shifted in layers. At first, it sounded like concern. My father would bring things up casually, like it had just crossed his mind. What do you think he was planning with the company? Did he ever say anything about restructuring assets? My mother framed it differently. He just wanted everything to stay in the family, she said one afternoon, stirring her coffee without looking at me. You know how important that was to him. I didn't respond. I noticed how often the conversation circled back to the same points. Property, accounts, control. Always indirect, never stated outright. Lily didn't bother with subtlety. She talked about the future like it was already decided. I've been thinking about expanding the studio idea, she said one night at dinner. Maybe 2 locations, one here, one out of state. My parents leaned in immediately. That could work, my mother said, with the right backing. My father nodded. Timing would be important. No one asked where that backing was coming from. They didn't need to. The assumption sat in the middle of the table, unspoken but fully understood. Later that week, my father said it more clearly. You're already stable, he told me. You've got a job lined up. You know how to manage yourself. I looked at him, and he shrugged slightly. You don't need as much. There it was, not a request, a justification. I didn't argue, didn't agree either. I just let it sit, because pushing back too early would have turned it into a conversation, and conversations were where they had always had control. Instead, I watched the pattern repeat, my mother softening the language, my father framing it as logic, my sister building plans on top of something that wasn't hers, and underneath all of it, the same expectation that, when the moment came, I would make it easy, that I would do what I had always done, adjust. By the time graduation week approached, the pressure wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was already built into every interaction, every assumption, every carefully worded sentence. They had already decided how this would end. They were just waiting for the right moment to make it official. And that moment, whether they realized it or not, had already been scheduled. By the time graduation week arrived, everything looked normal on the surface. That was the first sign it wasn't. My parents insisted on dinner at a well-known restaurant downtown, the kind of place built on presentation, white tablecloths, soft lighting, conversations kept just slow enough to feel controlled. It's your night, my mother said over the phone. We want it to be special. The wording was right. The tone wasn't. Too measured, too precise, like she'd practiced it. In the days leading up to the dinner, the messages started picking up. My father texted about timing. What time are you getting there? My mother asked about details that didn't matter. What are you planning to wear? Lily sent a message that stood out. Have you talked to the lawyer recently? I looked at the screen for a second before replying. No. Why? A pause. Then, just curious. Curious. That word again. The one people use when they want information without admitting why. I didn't follow up. Didn't need to. The pattern was already clear. Still, part of me ran through the same thought it always did. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe this time is different. 4 years of work, late nights, missed weekends. I let myself consider, briefly, that this might actually be about that. Recognition. It didn't last. The night of the dinner, I arrived early, not by accident. I wanted to see the room before stepping into it. From outside, through the glass, I could see them already seated. Lily was laughing. My parents leaned toward her, engaged, focused. The energy at the table was easy, natural. No one was looking toward the entrance. No one was waiting for me. I stood there for a moment, taking it in. Then I walked inside. My mother stood up immediately when she saw me. There you are, she said, stepping forward and wrapping her arms around me. The hug lasted a second too long. We were just talking about you. I didn't ask what that meant. I already had a good idea. The dinner started the way these things always do. Polite, relatives offering congratulations, glasses clinking, small talk moving in predictable patterns. My father nodded when someone mentioned my job offer, said the right things, smiled at the right moments. It didn't reach his eyes. Lily talked about her plans, new ideas, new directions, expensive ones. She spoke like everything ahead of her was already funded, already secured. My parents listened, not casually, intently, leaning in, asking questions, offering suggestions, investing attention. When the conversation shifted to me, it changed, not dramatically, just enough. So, my father said, cutting into his steak, not looking up right away, you'll be working long hours. I will, I said. You always do, he replied. It sounded like acknowledgement. It wasn't. I started noticing details then, small ones. My father checking his watch more than once. My mother barely touching her food. Lily leaning back slightly, her attention fixed on me instead of the conversation, waiting. All of them. This wasn't a celebration. It was a setup. The realization didn't come with emotion, just clarity. Dessert arrived. Plates were set down. Silverware adjusted. Conversation started to taper off. That's when my father cleared his throat. It wasn't loud, but it cut through everything at the table. "Ethan," he said. He reached down and picked up his briefcase. "We need to talk." The tone had changed. No more performance. No more pretense. He placed a folder on the table and slid it toward me. Slow, deliberate. The leather made a soft scraping sound against the surface as it moved. I looked at it, didn't touch it inside. I could already see the edges of documents, neatly organized, official, prepared in advance. My mother folded her hands in front of her. Lily stopped smiling. The room, which had felt controlled before, now felt contained, like everything had been leading to this exact moment. "This is important," my father said. I didn't respond, didn't open the folder, didn't ask what it was. I already knew, and they knew I knew. That was the part they hadn't accounted for. My father kept his hand on the folder for a second longer before letting it go. "Your grandfather trusted you," he said, "but you already have stability." There it was again. Not a request, a setup. "Lily doesn't," he continued. "She needs support, direction." I looked at him. Still didn't touch the folder. My mother leaned in slightly, her voice softer. "It's temporary," she said. "Just until things are properly managed." Managed. The word sat there, polished and harmless on the surface. It wasn't. It meant control. It meant access. It meant transfer. I didn't open the documents. Didn't need to read a single line to understand what they were asking. "You want me to sign over the inheritance?" I said. Not a question. My mother nodded. My father didn't. He didn't need to. It was already decided in his mind. "This is about family," he said. That word again. Used like leverage. Used like obligation. I let a second pass, then another. Not reacting too fast. Not giving them anything to work with. "I'm not signing anything." I said it once, even tone, no emphasis. That was enough. The shift at the table was immediate. Lily blinked, like she hadn't prepared for that answer. My mother's expression tightened, her hands folding together more firmly. My father frowned slightly, like I'd misheard him. "Don't make this difficult," he said. The phrasing was familiar. It always meant the same thing. "Comply. This doesn't have to be a problem," my mother added quickly. "We're just trying to make sure everything stays balanced." Balanced. Another word that didn't mean what it sounded like. "It already is," I said. That was the first time I'd pushed back without softening it, without explaining, without offering them something in return. Lily leaned forward. "Why are you acting like this?" she said. "It's not like you were even that close to him." I looked at her. Really looked this time, not as my sister, as someone who had never needed to question where things came from. "You wouldn't know," I said. The words landed flat, no anger behind them, just fact. My father's expression changed. Confusion gave way to irritation. Then something colder. "You don't understand what you're risking," he said. I held his gaze. "I do, and I did." Not in the way he meant. He thought I was risking approval, position, support. I knew I was stepping out of something that had never actually protected me. "I'm not signing," I repeated. That was it. No argument, no escalation, no room left to negotiate. And that was the moment everything shifted, because up until then, they still believed this was a conversation, that they could guide it, control it, end it the way they always had. They hadn't realized yet I was already done playing that role. For a second, no one moved. The refusal didn't land the way they expected. It didn't escalate into an argument. It didn't crack into emotion. It just sat there, final. That was what unsettled him. My father reached into his bag again, slow, this time deliberate. He didn't say anything at first, just pulled something out and placed it on the table between us. My diploma. The frame caught the light from above, clean, intact. 4 years reduced to a single piece of paper. He held it up slightly, enough for the people around us to notice. "You don't deserve your grandfather's money," he said. His voice stayed controlled, measured. That was when I understood what he was doing. Not asking, not negotiating, reasserting control. The lighter clicked. A small sound, too small for what followed. The flame caught at the corner first. Paper always gives in faster than people expect. The edge darkened, curled inward, pulling the rest of it with it. A gasp broke from somewhere to my left. A chair shifted behind me. A server stopped mid-step. I watched it burn. Didn't reach for it. Didn't tell him to stop. Because that wasn't the point. He thought it was. He thought the diploma meant something I needed. Something I would protect. Something he could take to force a reaction. An apology. Compliance. He was wrong. The fire spread across the surface, lines of ink distorting, disappearing. My mother didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the flame, like acknowledging it would make it real, in a way she couldn't control. Lily looked away. For the first time that night, she didn't have anything to say. And me, I felt it settle. Not anger, not shock. Clarity. This wasn't about fairness. It wasn't about family. It was about power. And he had just shown me exactly how far he was willing to go to keep it. The flame died out as quickly as it started. Ash curled in on itself, fragile, weightless. For a moment, the table was completely silent. No one spoke, no one moved. The restaurant noise came back in pieces, glasses, low voices, cutlery against plates. Life continuing around us like nothing had happened. My father looked at me, waiting, expecting something, anything. This was the part where I was supposed to break. Instead, I looked at the remains of the paper, then back at him. "Are you finished?" My voice didn't change, didn't rise, didn't hesitate. It landed the same way everything else had. Flat, controlled, final. He blinked. Just once. That was all it took. The control shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. And we both knew it. For a moment after the flame died, no one spoke. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt suspended. Like everything in the room was waiting to see what I would do next. My father was still standing, lighter in his hand, expecting a reaction, an apology, a correction, a step back into place. I didn't give him any of that. I looked at him for a second longer, then pushed my chair back and stood. The sound was quiet, controlled, but it cut through the tension like it didn't belong there. "I'm leaving," I said. No explanation, no escalation, just a statement. My mother stood quickly, her composure slipping just enough to show urgency. "If you walk out now," she said, lowering her voice, "you're making this worse." I met her eyes. "This was already worse," I said. Lily reached toward me, her hand hovering for a second before I stepped back. "Don't do this," she said under her breath. "You're embarrassing everyone." I didn't respond, because this wasn't about them. It wasn't about the room. It wasn't about appearances. My father's voice came next. Sit down, short, direct. The same tone he'd used my entire life. I didn't sit. I picked up my jacket instead. That was the moment he realized the command didn't work anymore. "You're making a mistake," he said. I looked at him. "I've made enough of those already," I replied. No anger, no edge, just acknowledgement. I folded my napkin, placed it neatly beside the plate, and stepped away from the table. A small habit. A controlled ending to something that had never really been stable. No one followed, not my mother, who was already recalculating how to manage the situation. Not Lily, who looked more confused than anything else. And not my father. He stayed where he was, still holding the lighter, still standing over something he thought would bring me back into line. Outside, the air felt different, cool, real. I stood on the sidewalk for a second, letting it settle. Cars passed. Conversations carried down the street. Somewhere, someone laughed. None of it had anything to do with me. And for the first time that night, that felt right. I ordered a ride and watched the restaurant fade in the reflection of the window as the car pulled away. My phone started vibrating almost immediately. Lily, then my mother, then an email notification from my father, long enough to scroll. I didn't open any of them, didn't read, didn't respond. That part was over. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes, not to escape, to think, not about what had happened, about what came next. Because this wasn't the end of anything. It was a transition. My grandfather's voice came back, clear as it had been the night he said it. "They're going to rush you." I wasn't rushing. I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. That night, I stayed at my Aunt Margaret's apartment. She opened the door, took one look at me, and stepped aside without asking questions. "There's coffee in the kitchen," she said, "or you can just rest." I chose silence, not the kind I used to hide, the kind you use when you don't need to explain yourself anymore. Later, lying on the couch, I replayed the dinner, every word, every move, every decision they thought I didn't see coming. It hadn't been a celebration, it had been a test, and for the first time in my life, I didn't pass it the way they expected. As sleep settled in, one thought stayed with me. They believed tonight was the moment I lost control. They were wrong. It was the moment they did. And by the time they realized it, the process was already in motion. The office didn't look like a place where anything dramatic happened. No raised voices, no tension in the walls, just clean lines, glass surfaces, and everything arranged with intention. The kind of space where things were decided quietly and permanently. I arrived early, not because I was nervous, because I didn't like being rushed. I sat across from the conference table, hands resting flat, watching the light move across the surface as the minutes passed. Mr. Caldwell, my grandfather's attorney, stood near the window, reviewing a file. "They'll be here shortly," he said. I nodded. "I'm ready." 5 minutes later, the door opened. My father walked in first, shoulders squared, expression controlled, like he was stepping into something he still believed he could manage. My mother followed, already tense, already anticipating resistance. Lily came in last, phone in hand, like this was something she expected to be quick. She stopped when she saw me. "You're really going through with this," she said. I didn't answer. They took their seats across from me. Same formation as always, different context. Mr. Caldwell didn't waste time, as stated in the last will and testament of Arthur Hayes. He began, voice even, precise. The room settled. No one interrupted. He read through the formalities first. Dates, witnesses, legal structure, everything deliberate, leaving no room for interpretation. Then he reached the line that mattered. The full estate, including all properties, financial holdings, business interests, and associated assets, is to be transferred solely to his grandson, Ethan Hayes. The silence hit immediately. My mother inhaled sharply. Lily leaned forward. "That's not possible," she said. "He wouldn't." "He did, mister," Caldwell said, without raising his voice. My father's control slipped just enough to show through. "This has to be a mistake," he said. "I'm his son." Mr. Caldwell met his eyes. He was aware of that. The words landed clean. No room to argue. Lily pushed back in her chair. "I've already made plans," she said, her voice sharper now. "Deposits, commitments. You can't just—" "It wasn't yours to spend," I said. That was the first time I spoke. She turned toward me, disbelief replacing certainty. "You don't even care about any of this," she said. "The house, the company. You don't even want it. Why do you get everything?" I held her gaze. "You don't know what I want," I said. "You never asked." My father shook his head, frustration cutting through whatever control he had left. "You're not equipped for this," he said. "You'll destroy everything he built." I didn't respond right away. Didn't need to, because this wasn't about convincing him. "You mean I won't hand it over?" I said. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before it. Mr. Caldwell reached for a small remote on the table. "There's one more item," he said, per Mr. Hayes' request. The screen at the end of the room flickered on. My grandfather appeared, seated in his study, older than I remembered, but unchanged where it mattered, sharp, focused. "If you're watching this," he began, "it means Ethan did exactly what I told him to do." My mother covered her mouth. My father didn't move. Lily stared at the screen like it might change if she looked long enough. "I watched this family overlook him." My grandfather continued. "I watched them reward noise over substance." My chest tightened slightly. I didn't look away. "Ethan stayed quiet," he said. "Not because he lacked strength, because he understood timing." A pause. Strength should be trusted, not used. The screen went dark. No one spoke. I stood up slowly. "Not to dominate the room, to end the conversation. This isn't revenge," I said. "It's responsibility." My father finally looked at me, not like I was something to manage, like I was something he couldn't. I held his gaze. "You burned my diploma," I said, "but you didn't burn my future." No reaction from him, no argument, because there wasn't one left. Mr. Caldwell slid the finalized documents toward me. I picked them up, placed them into my folder, and closed it. "This meeting is concluded," he said. No one stopped me as I walked out. Not my mother, not Lily, not my father. Outside. The air felt different, clear, for the first time. I hadn't needed to argue, didn't need to prove anything. The truth had already done that, and they had finally heard it. I didn't go back home after that meeting. There wasn't anything there I needed to return to. A week later, I signed the lease on a small apartment just outside the city. Not impressive, not temporary either. It was functional, quiet, exactly what I needed. Everything inside it was chosen on purpose. A desk by the window, a chair that didn't distract, a kitchen with just enough to keep things simple. No excess, no noise, for the first time. Every decision in that space belonged to me, at work. I didn't explain anything. I showed up, took on more responsibility, focused on what was in front of me: systems, deadlines, execution, the things I had always been good at. My manager noticed. "You're steady," he said one afternoon, after a meeting. "People rely on that." This time, the word didn't feel like dismissal. It felt accurate. I also started reviewing my grandfather's business. Not all at once, layer by layer. Financials first, then structure, then people. I brought in advisors not to lead, but to inform, asked questions, listened more than I spoke, the way he had. No rushed decisions, no emotional moves. Control wasn't something you claimed. It was something you maintained. My phone stayed quiet for a while. No calls, no messages. Then, one evening, my mother's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Her voice was softer than I remembered. "We don't understand how things got this far," she said. I didn't respond. "Your father is having a hard time," she added. I waited. "You didn't have to humiliate us," she said. There it was, not what happened, how it looked. "I didn't humiliate anyone," I said. I stopped agreeing to something that wasn't mine to give. Silence. She didn't argue, didn't apologize either. We ended the call without resolving anything. Lily never reached out. I heard things indirectly, plans falling through, deposits lost, reality setting in for the first time. Things didn't adjust around her. They adjusted around the truth, and I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt distance. Some evenings, I stood by the window and watched the city settle into itself, lights turning on, traffic slowing down, people moving through their lives without needing anything from me. There was no pressure to explain, no expectation to fix something that was never mine to fix, just space. And in that space, things started to stabilize, not perfectly, but honestly, for the first time. My life wasn't built around reacting to them. It was built around decisions I could stand behind, and that made all the difference. People ask me sometimes if I regret that night, the dinner, the moment I stood up, the moment I walked away. I don't think about it in terms of regret. I think about it in terms of clarity. For a long time, I believed strength meant endurance, staying quiet, not pushing back, not making things harder than they needed to be. I thought if I handled enough on my own, if I stayed consistent, if I didn't demand anything, eventually it would balance out. It didn't. What it did was make me easier to ignore, easier to rely on without recognition, easier to overlook when something better came along. I used to think that was maturity. It wasn't. It was adaptation. And adaptation, left unchecked, turns into permission. The night my father burned my diploma, he thought he was taking something from me. Proof, validation, leverage. But the diploma was never the source of anything real. It was a symbol. What mattered had already been built long before that night. In the way I learned to think, the way I learned to wait, the way I learned to recognize when something wasn't right and not react immediately, just to relieve the pressure. At the lawyer's office, I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself, I didn't ask for acknowledgement. I let the structure do what it was designed to do. Facts, documentation, process. That's something I didn't understand when I was younger. You don't always win by confronting people directly. Sometimes you win by stepping out of the situation they're trying to control, by refusing to participate in it at all. After that, things changed. Not all at once, but steadily. I stopped measuring my decisions against their expectations, stopped adjusting to avoid conflict, stopped explaining things that didn't need explanation. There's a difference between being calm and being passive. I didn't see it before. Calm is control. Passive is avoidance. One keeps you steady, the other keeps you stuck. I had spent years being mistaken for the second, even by myself. These days, my life is quieter, not empty, structured, intentional. I work, I build, I make decisions without needing to check how they'll be received. I keep people around who don't require me to shrink to make things easier. And I leave space where it's needed. I still think about my grandfather, about the way he handled things, the way he trusted timing over reaction. He told me once, "You don't owe anyone access to your future." It took me years to understand that. If you're listening to this, and you've ever been told you don't deserve what's yours, your voice, your boundaries, your time, your peace, understand this. Calm doesn't mean weak. Walking away doesn't mean losing. And choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. You don't need to argue with people who have already decided not to hear you. You don't need to prove your value to people who benefit from ignoring it. And you don't need to stay in a situation just because it's familiar. I didn't win because I fought harder. I didn't win because I convinced anyone. I won because I stopped participating in something that was never built for me. And once I did that, everything else followed. This story is a work of fiction, inspired by common family dynamics, and is intended for entertainment purposes only.